The night was calm, the kind of calm that made people feel something big was coming. Over the city of Geneva, the stars shone quietly, until one of them began to move. At first, people thought it was a meteor, a bright silver light cutting across the sky, but it didn't fall. It slowed down. It stopped. Every radio, every television, every communication line in the world began to buzz. Satellites picked up the signal. It was not natural. Something was entering Earth's orbit. Dr. Elias Ward stood on the roof of the research base, his hands trembling. He had dreamed of this day since childhood. First contact, real, living proof that humanity was not alone. The object grew larger as it descended through the clouds. It wasn't a missile or a plane. It was smooth, perfect, like a tear of metal and light. The air itself seemed to hum as it passed. The massive ship came down slowly, hovering above the open field near the base. Soldiers surrounded the area. Helicopters circled in the sky. Scientists rushed forward trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Elias could barely breathe. He wasn't afraid. He was in awe. The ship's surface shimmered like water. It had no visible engines, no markings, no sound. Just a low vibration, deep enough to feel in the bones. And then, it opened. A single line appeared across its surface, glowing brighter and brighter until it split apart. From inside, a warm golden light spilled out, bright enough to turn night into dawn. Everyone shielded their eyes. The air smelled faintly of rain and something strange, sweet. Like ozone and flowers, out of the light, a figure stepped forward. She was tall and slender, her skin a soft blue-gray, almost translucent. Her movements were graceful, slow, careful. No armor, no weapon, just a flowing garment that glowed faintly at the edges. Her eyes were large, bright, full of something that looked almost like fear. Elias's heart pounded. Every soldier raised their weapon and he wanted to shout, "Don't!" But his voice froze. The alien stopped at the edge of the ramp and looked at the humans. For a moment, no one moved. The wind whispered, and 1,000 hearts beat as one. Then she raised a trembling hand and touched her chest. A simple gesture, her expression soft, peaceful. Elias understood instantly it was a greeting. He stepped forward, his own hand slowly rising to mirror hers. The soldiers tensed, but the commander held his hand up, allowing the scientist to continue. The world seemed to fade away until there was only the two of them, man and alien, human and visitor, both standing in the silence between two worlds. Elias spoke softly. "Hello," the alien tilted her head. The sound of his voice seemed to calm her. She blinked, a faint silver shimmer running across her eyes, and then she made a sound, soft, melodic, like wind over glass. It wasn't a word he could understand, but it didn't need to be. Something passed between them. A feeling, a connection. Her hand lowered and she took one careful step forward as if testing the ground. Then another. Elias didn't move. He only watched her approach, his breath shallow, his heart heavy with wonder. When she finally stopped a few feet away, she looked up at the sky, then at him. Slowly, she extended her hand toward him. Her fingers were long, delicate, glowing faintly at the tips. Elias hesitated. The soldiers murmured nervously. But he couldn't resist the pull. He reached out too. Their hands didn't quite touch, just a small distance apart, close enough to feel the faint energy between them. The air seemed to hold its breath. And then she smiled. It was the smallest thing. A curve of lips, uncertain and beautiful. Not human, not alien, just pure emotion shared across the stars. Elias felt something break inside him. The distance between species, the fear, the doubt, all of it fell away. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from. But at that moment he knew something greater than science, greater than discovery. He knew that she was alive. And she was kind. The commander's voice shouted through the radios calling for a medical team, but Elias didn't hear it. The alien's soft gaze held him still. No weapons, no words, no demands. Just that gentle look and the quiet understanding that had passed between them. When her hand lowered again, she placed it lightly over her own heart and bowed her head. Elias did the same. The first contact between humanity and another world began not with fear or fire, but with two hearts beating softly under the same sky, and, though no one could explain it, every person watching felt the same thing, a strange, quiet hope. The world changed after that night. Every news channel, every radio, every online feed showed the same image. The moment the alien and the human reached toward each other, the image spread across the world like a spark of hope. People called her Lura, the name scientists gave her after they learned to write one of her symbols. She never spoke in words, only in soft tones that rose and fell like a song, and though no one could translate her language, she seemed to understand more than anyone expected. Dr. Elias Ward was chosen to work closely with her. He was not the most experienced nor the highest-ranking scientist, but he was the first person she trusted. Each morning he would enter the glass observation room where Lura stayed. The walls were transparent and guards stood outside. But Elias never saw a prisoner. He saw a guest, far from home. She would always greet him with a small motion of her hand, a circle traced in the air ending over her heart. Elias had learned to copy it. It was her way of saying hello. At first, they communicated with simple things, pictures, objects, gestures. He showed her a cup. She repeated the word slowly, cup. He smiled every time. She smiled too, though her smile was strange, like someone still learning what it meant to be human. Day by day, their understanding grew. He showed her stars on a map and she pointed to one, far away, near the edge of the galaxy. That was her home, he guessed. Sometimes he would draw small things, flowers, oceans, animals. Lura would watch with wide eyes, her fingers tracing the lines in the air. She was fascinated by Earth, by humans, by the simple beauty of ordinary life. One day, when Elias brought her a paper filled with pictures of human faces, sad, happy, angry, surprised, she stared at it for a long time. Then slowly she pointed to one face, sad. She placed her hand on her chest, then on his. Her touch was gentle, light as air. But Elias understood the message instantly. She wasn't talking about herself. She was asking if he was sad. He didn't know how she could tell. Maybe it was the way his voice shook or how he avoided her eyes when talking about the outside world, about the people who didn't trust her. Elias nodded slowly. Sometimes, he said. Lura didn't understand the word, but she seemed to feel the meaning. Her eyes softened and she made a sound, low and musical like comfort. He felt something break inside him again the same way it did the first night they met. That simple kindness, that small act of care reached deeper than words could. As days passed, Lura's health began to weaken. The human atmosphere, though not deadly, made her tired and pale. Elias worried constantly. He begged the higher officials to let her ship's systems help stabilize her, but they refused. They were afraid. Too dangerous, they said. We don't know what her technology could do, but Elias saw only pain in her eyes. Every time she coughed, her silver-blue veins glowed faintly like starlight fading. One evening, when most of the team had gone, he stayed behind. Lura sat near the glass wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. Elias couldn't stand watching anymore. He placed his hand on the glass. "Can you hear me?" he whispered. "You're going to be okay." She lifted her head weakly, her eyes searching his face. Then she raised her own hand and placed it exactly where his was, but on the other side of the glass. Their palms were separated by only an inch of clear wall, but somehow it felt like the distance between two worlds. A faint glow spread from her hand, the same golden light he had seen the first day she arrived. It pulsed gently under the glass, warm and steady. For a moment, Elias felt something impossible. His chest grew lighter and the cold. Heavy fear inside him melted away. She was healing him. When the glow faded, she smiled faintly, her lips trembling. Her voice was a whisper of sound, too soft to understand, but it carried emotion so deep it almost hurt. Her hand slid down the glass, leaving behind a faint print of light that slowly faded. That night, Elias could not sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the stars, thinking about her touch, the way it had felt even through the barrier, like she had reached inside his heart. She wasn't just trying to communicate. She was connecting, not scientist and subject, not alien and human, something more, something fragile and beautiful, growing between two beings who were never meant to meet, but somehow had. And as Elias looked up at the endless night sky, he whispered to the stars, "She doesn't need to speak. Her gentle touch says everything." The bond between Elias and Lura grew stronger with each passing day. What started as curiosity had turned into trust, and that trust had begun to turn into something deeper, something no one could measure or explain. But not everyone saw it that way. Around the base, whispers had started to spread. Some soldiers believed Lura was dangerous. They said her glowing skin was a form of radiation, her voice was a hidden weapon, her ship a silent threat hanging above them. Fear, like a poison, moved faster than truth. Elias tried to ignore the rumors. He kept working with her, teaching words, sharing pictures, showing her simple human things, flowers, oceans, music. Lura was always gentle, always kind. She never raised her voice, never showed anger. But even her calmness made people uneasy. One morning, Elias entered the observation room and found 2 guards standing inside. Their faces were cold, their hands on their weapons. Lura sat quietly on her bed, her silver blue eyes watching the floor. "What's going on?" Elias asked. The commander, standing behind the glass, didn't meet his eyes. "Orders from above. She's being moved. Higher clearance only." "Moved?" Elias felt his stomach twist. "She's not a threat. You can't just—" "It's not your call, Doctor," the commander said sharply. "We're following protocol." Elias turned to Lura, who was now standing, confusion in her eyes. She didn't understand the words, but she could feel the fear in the room. She took a slow step toward Elias, her hands trembling. One of the guards raised his weapon slightly. "Stay back, no!" Elias shouted, stepping between them. "Don't you dare point that at her." The air was thick with tension. For a moment, everything was silent except for the low hum of the lights. Then Lura raised her hand slowly, palms open, showing peace. Her eyes softened as if to tell them she meant no harm. But fear doesn't listen to kindness. The guards grabbed her arms and pulled her toward the door. She didn't fight, she only looked back at Elias, her expression full of quiet pain. "Wait," Elias shouted. "Where are you taking her?" No one answered. The doors closed and she was gone. That night, the base was filled with unease. The lights flickered and the sound of distant thunder rolled over the mountains. Elias sat alone in the empty observation room, staring at the chair where she used to sit. On the glass, the faint print of her hand still glowed, barely visible but there. He pressed his own hand against it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I promised you were safe here." The next few days passed in silence. No one told him where Lura had been taken. They said it was classified, but Elias could feel something was wrong. He noticed restricted access doors, military shipments, and strange scientists arriving from other countries. They weren't studying peace anymore. They were preparing for control. Late one night, as he walked through the lower halls of the base, Elias heard a faint sound. A melody. Soft, broken, but familiar. It was her. He followed the sound down to the containment wing. The corridor was dimly lit, cold and silent. Behind a steel door he found her, Lura, sitting on the floor of a small empty cell. Her hands were bound by glowing restraints that pulsed faintly with energy. When she saw him, her eyes widened. She called out, her voice weak but filled with emotion. "Elias." It was the first time she said his name. He froze, his breath catching. You can speak?" Her lips trembled as she repeated, "Elias." He rushed to the glass, pressing his hands against it. "I'm here. I'll get you out." She shook her head weakly, her eyes full of fear. "No, danger." She placed her hand against the glass again, the same way she always did. But this time the glow from her skin was fading. Elias felt anger burn inside him. "They don't understand you," he said through the glass. "They're afraid of what they can't control." She tilted her head slightly, as if searching for the right words. "Human, afraid." Her voice was soft, broken, but clear enough. "Yes," Elias whispered. "They're afraid. But not me. Not ever." Lura smiled faintly. Her hand trembled as she reached higher on the glass, and the faint light grew brighter for a moment, just enough to cast his reflection beside hers. Then she whispered, "Light." "Same?" Elias's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," he said. "The same." The security alarm suddenly blared. Someone had detected unauthorized access. Guards were coming. Elias turned back one last time, his heart heavy. Lura was still looking at him, her lips forming silent words he couldn't hear, but he understood. "Don't give up." When the guards arrived, they dragged Elias away. He didn't fight. His thoughts were only of her voice, her touch, her courage. That night, locked in his quarters, Elias looked out the window at the hovering alien ship glowing faintly above the clouds. The world thought she was dangerous, but to him she was proof that kindness could cross galaxies. And deep inside, Elias knew something for certain. If humanity lost her, they would lose more than an alien. They would lose their own chance to be better. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the mountains, thunder shaking the earth. The base lights flickered, and alarms began to scream through the corridors. Soldiers ran in every direction, shouting orders as systems failed one by one. Dr. Elias Ward stood near the control room, watching chaos unfold on the screens. Power readings were unstable, communication lines were dead, and above them the alien ship was glowing again, its surface pulsing like a heartbeat. He knew what it meant. Lura's people were calling for her. Fear spread like wildfire. Some shouted that the ship was about to attack. Others believed it was a rescue. But Elias didn't hesitate. He knew she was in danger. He knew this was his only chance to save her. He ran through the corridors, heart pounding, passing soldiers who barely noticed him in the confusion. The base trembled as lightning struck the outer walls. Sparks flew from broken panels. He reached the lower levels, the containment wing where Lura was being held. The guards were gone, either ordered elsewhere or too afraid to stay. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Elias swiped his security card, but the door denied access. He slammed his fist against it. Come on, come on. He tried the override code, the one he had memorized months ago. The light turned green. The door slid open with a low hiss. Inside, the cell was dimly lit. Lura sat on the floor, her hands still bound by glowing restraints. She looked weak, her skin dull and pale, her breathing slow. When she saw him, her eyes widened in disbelief. Elias, she whispered softly. He ran to her side, kneeling down. I'm here, he said. I'm getting you out. Her eyes flickered with light. No, danger, he shook his head. I don't care. You don't belong in a cage. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then nodded slowly. Elias searched for a way to remove the restraints. They were made from alien material, but connected to a human power box. He pulled a wire free with his bare hands. The metal burned his fingers, but he didn't stop. Sparks flew as he tore it loose. The restraints flickered, then fell from her wrists. Lura gasped, rubbing her sore skin. Elias reached out, his voice gentle. Can you stand? She nodded weakly. When she tried to rise, she stumbled, but Elias caught her. Her body was light, almost weightless, as if she was made of mist and starlight. Outside the cell, the base shook again. A deep rumble filled the air. Something massive was moving above them. Lura's ship was drawing closer. He helped her walk through the halls. Lights burst overhead, casting short flashes of blue and white. Every step they took felt heavier than the last. Why? She asked softly as they moved, her voice trembling. Elias looked at her. Why what? Help? Me. Her words were slow, uncertain, but her meaning was clear. He smiled sadly. Because you helped me first. Lura blinked, her eyes glistening with silver light. They reached a stairwell, but part of the ceiling had collapsed. Smoke filled the air. Elias coughed, pulling her close. We'll find another way. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed. A beam fell from above, slamming down between them. The impact knocked Elias back. Pain shot through his shoulder. Dust covered everything. Lura screamed his name, her voice echoing through the hall. She pushed at the beam, glowing lines appearing along her arms as she tried to lift it. Elias stared in disbelief. The light from her body was spreading again, brighter than before. The air around her shimmered with energy. With one final push, she moved the beam just enough for him to crawl through. He grabbed her hand. Her skin was cool, her touch steady, and together they ran again. They reached the exit, a large blast door that led to the surface. Outside, the storm raged with violent beauty. The alien ship hovered low, lightning flashing across its surface. Elias turned to her. Can you reach them? She nodded, placing her hand on the metal door. A soft tone filled the air, almost like a song. The door unlocked. When they stepped outside, the wind nearly threw them back. The ship's light surrounded them, golden and alive. Soldiers stood in the distance, their weapons lowered in confusion. Lura stopped at the edge of the ramp. Her eyes met Elias's. For a moment, the world was silent again. She placed her hand gently on his chest, right over his heart, the same way she had done when they first met. Her eyes were full of emotion, fear, gratitude, sorrow, all at once. Elias felt tears blur his vision. Go, he whispered. They'll kill you if you stay. Lura shook her head. Come. He hesitated, torn between duty and the pull of something greater. "I can't," he said. "My world still needs to change. Someone has to make them see you're not the enemy." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she leaned forward and touched her forehead lightly against his. The gesture was strange, but full of warmth. When she pulled away, her eyes shimmered like distant stars. "Light. Same," she whispered again. Then she turned and walked up the ramp into the ship. The golden glow grew brighter, wrapping around her like a promise. The ship lifted into the clouds, leaving only the echo of her voice in the wind. Elias stood in the rain, trembling, his heart both breaking and full. He had lost her, but in saving her, he had saved something else too. Hope. The sky was quiet again. The golden light that once filled the air was gone, leaving behind only rain and the low sound of thunder rolling over the mountains. Elias stood alone in the open field, his clothes soaked, his hands trembling. The alien ship had vanished into the clouds, and with it she was gone. Lura, the being who had shown him more kindness than anyone on his own planet, had returned to the stars. For a long time he didn't move. The soldiers eventually found him there, staring at the sky like a man who had lost his reason. When they asked what had happened, he said only 4 words, soft, broken, and true. She went home free. No one believed him. The military called it an incident. The official report said that the alien escaped during the storm, possibly with help from external forces. Elias was questioned for hours, accused of betraying human safety, accused of being blinded by emotion. He didn't argue. He just sat there silent, his eyes distant. Every time they demanded an answer, he thought of her voice saying his name, her hand on his chest, and that last whisper. Light. Same. When they finally released him, he was no longer the same man who had first looked up at the stars in wonder. Days turned into weeks. The world was still buzzing with news about the alien escape. Politicians argued. Scientists speculated. Some said she would return with an army. Others said she had died in the storm, but Elias knew better. He could still feel the echo of her presence in his chest, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He returned to the research base, now mostly abandoned, to collect his belongings. The walls were cold and silent, and the room where she had once stayed was empty. But when he stepped inside, something caught his eye, a faint shimmer on the glass wall. He walked closer. There, glowing softly in the dim light, was the mark of her hand, the same handprint she had left the night before she was taken. It had never fully faded. He placed his palm over it the same way he had done so many times before. The glow brightened faintly as if responding to his touch, and for a brief moment he felt it again, her warmth, her calmness, her gentle spirit. Tears filled his eyes. "You kept your promise," he whispered. "You came in peace, and we failed you." But deep inside he also knew something else. She hadn't left in anger. She had left in hope. Outside the base, the world had already moved on. The skies were the same, the stars unchanged. But for Elias, everything felt different. The world suddenly seemed smaller, lonelier, colder. Yet every night he found himself looking up, searching. He would sit by his window, watching the stars until dawn, whispering to the night. "Are you out there, Laura? Do you still remember?" Sometimes he thought he saw a flicker in the distance, just a faint golden light like a heartbeat in the sky. He liked to believe it was her, looking back. Months passed. Humanity began to change in small ways. People started talking about peace, about understanding, about kindness that crossed beyond borders. Some said it was because of her visit. Others said it was just coincidence, but Elias knew. The world had seen her, had seen what true gentleness looked like. And even if many were afraid, some had learned something beautiful that day. One evening, as he walked near the mountain ridge where her ship had first landed, he found a small piece of metal half buried in the dirt. It shimmered faintly, humming softly when he touched it. He smiled. It was part of her ship, left behind, perhaps on purpose. When he held it close to his chest, it warmed slightly, like it recognized him. For a moment he felt she was there again, her calm voice whispering through the air. He closed his eyes and whispered back, "I miss you." The wind blew softly, carrying the smell of rain and distant flowers. The clouds parted, revealing a patch of sky full of stars. Among them, one shone brighter than the rest, pale gold, steady and pure. Elias stood there for a long time, watching it. He didn't need proof or science to know the truth. That was her star. And somewhere out there, beyond the distance and silence, Laura was looking at the same sky, remembering the human who had touched her heart. For the first time in weeks, Elias smiled. Maybe one day the worlds would meet again. Maybe one day fear would fade, and hearts would finally listen instead of fight. But until then, he would keep her memory alive, the alien who had shown humanity that peace didn't need words, only courage, and a gentle touch. He turned to leave, the small piece of her ship glowing faintly in his palm, like a promise that refused to fade. And as the night wind brushed against his face, he whispered one last time to the sky, "Between stars and strangers, we were never truly apart." Years passed quietly after that night. The world changed little by little. The fear that once filled people's hearts began to fade, replaced by questions, curiosity, even wonder. Children in schools now learned about the Visitor of Light, the first alien to touch Earth without violence. Her image appeared in books and screens, drawn from blurry recordings and half-remembered stories. No one truly knew what she looked like, but to Elias he didn't need pictures. He remembered her perfectly. Every gentle movement, every look of sadness, every spark of light that had once glowed under her skin. Elias had left the military long ago. He now lived in a quiet town near the coast, far from the old base. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, calm and vast, reminding him of space itself. Every morning he walked to the cliff and watched the sunrise. It was his daily prayer to the sky, a promise he kept for her. He had grown older, his hair now streaked with silver, but his eyes still carried that same quiet fire, the one she had once seen in him. One evening, while sitting by the shore, Elias noticed something strange. The radio on his small porch crackled softly, even though it wasn't on any active channel. It was just static until a soft rhythmic pulse began to rise from the noise. Beep. Pause. Beep, beep. Pause. The pattern repeated. Steady, gentle, almost like a heartbeat. Elias froze. That rhythm, it was familiar. He quickly tuned the dial, adjusting the old receiver until the static faded, and then through the soft hiss he heard it, faint but clear, a voice. Not human, but delicate, like wind singing through crystal. As he dropped his cup, his heart pounding. For a long moment he couldn't breathe. Then the voice came again, soft and broken, but full of warmth. Light, same. Tears welled in his eyes. He pressed his hand against the cold metal of the radio, whispering, "Laura." Static answered him. But the pulse continued, beep, pause, beep, beep. He remembered that rhythm. It was the same signal her heart had made when she touched him years ago. The same pulse that once matched his. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat by the radio, listening to the soft beat that refused to fade. He tried recording it, analyzing it, but deep down he already knew. No science could explain it. It wasn't a random signal. It was her. The next day, Elias went to the observatory in the nearby city. He showed the recording to the scientists there. They listened carefully, intrigued but doubtful. "It's unusual," one said, "but it could be interference from a satellite." Elias smiled faintly. "Or maybe it's someone saying hello." They laughed politely, not understanding the weight in his voice. But that night, when Elias returned home, the signal grew stronger. The beeps now carried faint tones, notes forming a melody. It sounded like music, but not from any instrument he knew, soft, flowing, almost like a lullaby. He closed his eyes and listened. It felt like a hand brushing against his face. It felt like her again. He whispered to the dark sky, "You found a way, didn't you?" Outside, the stars shimmered brighter than usual. And there, among them, he saw it. A golden light, faint but steady, moving slowly across the heavens. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a plane. It was something alive, graceful, peaceful. He stood on the porch barefoot, his heart trembling. "Laura," he whispered again. "You came back." The light seemed to pause, as if answering him. Then it pulsed once, bright and soft, just like her gentle touch long ago. And then, slowly, it faded into the horizon. For days after that, Elias became a quiet legend in his town. People said the old man by the sea had seen a star move like a heartbeat. Some said he was imagining things. Others believed. But Elias didn't care what anyone thought. He knew the truth. Every night he still sat by the radio, listening to the soft pulse that never stopped. It wasn't just a signal anymore, it was a message, a promise, that across all distance and time they were still connected. Sometimes, when the night grew quiet, he would hear her voice again, faint as a dream, gentle, kind, and full of emotion. "Never strangers." Again, and he would whisper back, tears running down his face. "Never again." The sea waves crashed softly below. The stars shimmered above. Between them stood one human heart, listening to a voice from light years away. Proof that love could survive beyond planets, beyond fear, beyond everything. That night, as Elias drifted into sleep by the radio, the soft hum filled the air again. The lights flickered gently in the room, and if anyone had looked closely, they would have seen something beautiful, his hand glowing faintly gold where it rested on the radio. Years passed again, like quiet waves against the shore. Elias was no longer a young man. His hair had turned completely white, his hands thin and trembling. But his heart was still strong, still waiting. Every night he listened to the same signal, the gentle beeping, the faint melody, the soft whisper that sometimes broke through the static. It was his only companion. People had started calling it the Star Song. Scientists around the world studied it, recorded it, debated it. Some said it was just a repeating space pattern. Others began to believe what Elias had said all along. "It's her," he told them. "It's Laura, she's talking to us." And soon others began to see what he meant. The pattern wasn't random. The rhythm carried meaning. It wasn't just communication. It was emotion, turned into light and sound. When humanity finally decoded a small part of it, the translation shocked everyone. It said, "We are not alone. We remember your kindness. The world changed overnight." People looked up at the stars differently now. For the first time in centuries, hope was louder than fear. The governments opened old records, revealing everything about the visitor of light. Her image spread across screens again, soft, glowing, peaceful. The story of how one human freed her became known. They called Elias the keeper of the signal. He became a symbol of peace, an old man who had once touched a being of another world. Not with power, but with kindness. But Elias didn't care about fame. He only cared about one thing, that she was alive. Every evening he sat by his small radio and looked at the sky. The same sea wind brushed his face. The same soft golden light blinked among the stars. Until one night something changed. The signal grew stronger. The melody became clearer, sharper, almost like a song meant only for him. The air around the small cottage shimmered faintly, the same golden hue he remembered from years ago. He stepped outside, his heart trembling. Above him, the stars began to move. Slowly, beautifully, the lights aligned, forming a circle of faint gold. Then a single beam descended quietly to the ground in front of him. The grass bent under the glow. The air smelled like rain and silver dust. Elias raised his trembling hand. "Laura," and then he saw her, not in full form but as a being of light, soft and transparent, her shape gentle and warm. Her golden eyes shone like morning sun. Her voice was still like music. "Elias," she whispered. He couldn't speak. His throat closed, tears filling his eyes. "You came back?" Her light flickered softly. "I never left." He stepped closer, reaching out, his hand shaking. "I thought you were gone forever." Her form brightened, shimmering like waves. No distance is forever, when hearts remember. For a long moment they simply stood there, human and alien, earth and star, silent in understanding. The same golden glow that had once connected them years ago bloomed between their hands again. Warm, steady, alive. In that moment, Elias didn't feel old anymore. He felt young, whole, alive. The air itself seemed to hum with peace. "You found me again," he whispered. Laura's light tilted gently, almost like a smile. "You called," I answered. The stars above began to move again, forming strange and beautiful shapes in the sky. A massive ship glowed faintly in orbit, peaceful and calm. For the first time, humanity saw it. Not as a threat, but as a visitor of friendship. Messages poured across Earth. People gathered outside, watching the sky light up with gold. There were no weapons, no fear, only silence, awe, and tears. The message broadcasted from space was simple. Peace. Always peace. Elias turned to her. "They'll listen this time," he said softly. "They'll understand." Her voice was full of warmth. Because of you. They already do. He smiled weakly, his eyes shining. I waited so long. And I came, she whispered, because your heart never stopped calling. She reached out, her light touching his chest. The glow spread gently across his skin, soft and golden. He felt warmth fill him, not painful, just peaceful. He looked into her eyes and whispered, I'm ready to rest now. Her light flickered again, tenderly. Then rest. In light, Elias closed his eyes. The wind grew calm. His breathing slowed, then softened. He smiled. Peaceful, free. When morning came, the townspeople found him sitting on the porch, the radio silent for the first time in years. His face looked calm, smiling toward the sky, and above him, in the bright daylight, a faint golden shimmer lingered in the clouds. For 3 nights afterward, people across the world reported seeing strange glowing patterns in the sky. 2 lights circling each other, merging, then vanishing beyond the horizon. Scientists couldn't explain it. But those who had followed the star song knew the truth. The human and the alien, Elias and Laura, were together again, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as proof that even across galaxies love could speak louder than fear. And when the wind whispered through the hills on quiet nights, people swore they could still hear it, the soft pulse of 2 hearts, beating in harmony between stars. Her gentle touch said everything. They were no longer strangers.